Queen of Swords. All right, let's see where we got the Queen of Swords. Death. There's some changes here, and there may be a little bit of reluctance, right? Like if it's change that's not your own, it's resistant, right? Because it's not in your control. So I don't think that this is meaning necessarily that you guys are, trying to control everything because, this is something wrong with you, something malicious. It's just that the reason why there's certain resistance or certain control has to do with protecting yourself, right? The Queen of Swords is a queen that's been through a lot of difficult things, a lot of horrible things. And there's a lot of great things, but those difficult times have made her stronger. And I feel like that's what you guys have noticed about yourselves. You guys have definitely gotten stronger with the difficult times that you guys have faced, but there is resisting some sort of transition, some sort of change, and it may be change that may not be within your control, because you have the Eight of Cups here. That does talk about not being satisfied with the situation, ready to go ahead and just leave it as is, right? You're not necessarily upset about it. You're not pissed off. You're just over it, right? You're not necessarily able to give any more than you have been, right? You think you've put in a lot of work. And it's showing here that the Queen of Pentacles, you've applied yourself, you've committed to your, to whatever it was that you've been putting a lot of effort and time into. You've been putting a lot of work into it. So it makes sense, naturally, if you've been putting a lot of work into something that you saw value in the past, it may not be getting you anything now, so you're emotionally done with it. Because here with the Five of Cups, I kind of feel like with this situation, with how much work you've been putting into something, you kind of feel like because it hasn't given you anything back, you feel like you either missed an opportunity, somebody may have left, or maybe you feel like you're done with something, or something's ended, something that you regret, okay? Because the Five of Cups can talk about regret. Either this could be the other person as well. Maybe they regret something, or especially in regards to interaction and working together and doing things as a couple. So yeah, I kind of get the sense that with the Five of Cups, there's a lot of looking at missed opportunities. And the shifting to looking at what the possibilities are, they're there. It's hard to overlook this, which is why the Queen of Swords is coming up, right? Like, you want to protect yourself from any more loss, but in order for yourself to do that, instead of preparing for it, because if you think about it, the Five of Swords is really giving me a seriously big sign. Be careful not to prevent anything bad from happening, because that may end up sabotaging it anyway and causing exactly what you're fearing, right? Because I think you do want the Two of Cups. This is in your hopes and fears. This is usually this is what's been going down, something that may have fallen through. But if you shift your focus back to love, things will be fine. Things will be perfect, right? And I feel like you guys know that. But it's just hard to do it when you guys know how things have gone in the past, and it's just very painful. So I kind of get the sense that for a lot of you guys, it's hard to shift your focus away from what could happen or what has already happened in the past. And really, I think in the top of your head, some of you guys are thinking, what is going to prevent this from happening again? It's by shifting your focus. Because the Five of Swords is talking about, talks about fighting for what not fighting for what you believe in, but, not compromise. You can talk about not compromising. You can talk about being, really figuring out whether or not some sort of direction is worth it or not. Making sure your needs are met and things like that, but do the inconvenience and the inconsideration of others, right? Because the Five of Swords isn't around being selfish, but it's about being considerate too that counts. You don't have to be inconsiderate. You could definitely be selfish, but you don't have to be considerate. So I kind of get this feeling that you guys, of course, because you've been hurt in the past, there's some things, especially because considering that you've been, committed, you put a lot of, value, work into something, put a lot of time into it, into a past relationship, and that was something happened where you may have lost that. But I don't think that this is the same situation again. I don't think this is the same circumstance because of just how the Five of Swords is really talking about. Be careful about what you believe is more important, whether this is you taking control of the situation or the relationship. Now, the Five of Swords tells me that there is something there regarding other people, and I feel like of course, the inclination to make sure you're covered is, of course, one of those things that's going to come up. You should always make sure that you're covered, but that's what your boundaries are there for. The second you start fighting and fighting over petty things, it could be material, it could be money, it could be something else, right? is it worth it enough to put the relationship in such a position where there's no way to move forward, because there's a lot of looking at a situation, that a lot of looking at something that may not necessarily matter to the real, to the overall connection, right? It's about, Five of Swords is petty arguments, right? Fighting about things that really don't matter, that really don't really have anything to do with the current situation. Some of you guys may be dealing with somebody that's causing a lot of friction, being very combative with you, and it's frustrating because perhaps you guys are trying to go in a new direction. But I kind of get this feeling that some of you guys may be dealing with someone that, yes, this person is trying to start new, start fresh. There may have been a falling out before with somebody in the past, maybe the same person. And there's conflict now because this person maybe is bringing a lot of change, bringing a lot of new ideas that you may not be exactly excited about hearing, things that may not be exactly of what your interest. And I feel like the Five of Swords is saying, I don't think it's necessarily, it's up to you figuring out what is worth the sacrifice and what isn't, right? It's like, I feel like you can either go two ways. Be careful what you compromise with, and then be careful what you're too uncompromising about. Because if it's worth the relationship breaking up, or if it's worth putting your emotions aside, or putting your feelings aside to run with it because you're so committed to the relationship, that's up to you. Nobody can tell you the right or wrong answer with that. But that's why the Five of Swords is such a neutral energy, in my opinion, because even though it's saying be cautious that to get caught up in the details and then lose yourself in that detail and then end up severing ties in areas that you don't want to, or compromising parts of yourself that you really shouldn't probably compromise for the sake of the relationship. It's really all about figuring out what works for you. And the only way any of those things apply is if you can look at the situation from the perspective of what you're giving up and what you're not willing to give up. So I feel like with this future showing up, the Two of Wands, there's a lot of decisions that you have to make, there's not a lot of decisions. There's a choice in which you have to make in regards to how you're going to make your dreams come true. How are you going to advance in this relationship? What direction are you both trying to head towards? All right, where do you guys get started? Because I do feel like there is the Two of Cups behind you, meaning that there's other opportunities, there's other things that you can work with despite what you've lost, right? And using this Three of Cups as a learning experience to be able to move forward, right? To be able to work with what you have. And I feel like you guys are trying to shift that focus. It's just a little hard right now, considering that whatever you guys have just literally walked away from, you're having to kind of like give yourself time to ease into this. It's a little hard, right? When you're trying to be like, no, I'm done. And you just lost something that was precious to you. And it's just like, okay, but there's other things I can work with. It's just still a little difficult, but you can do it. And I feel like the way you do it isn't by fighting over stuff that doesn't necessarily have anything to do with the relationship. It's about seeing the bigger picture at the end of the day. It's hard to do with this energy, considering that there's a lot of changes that are happening that you don't really want to change, right? Death is a very difficult energy, and it's going to happen one way or the other usually. Resisting it is usually prolonging the inevitable. But I feel like the Five of Cups, Five of Swords, it's just that there's different ideas, different perspectives, and you may leave some of this behind, and that's the part that hurts. Maybe you feel like because you feel like you missed some opportunities, you can't achieve those things. But I feel like the relationship is showing there's an opportunity to do it. There's just another way that you may have to go about doing it instead of the old-fashioned way, the way that you had planned. And therefore, it's causing a lot of conflict. So your hopes and fears is the Two of Cups, family. Like, you guys really feel a strong connection with this person. And I really feel like you guys have a lot of the same ideals. You really want this relationship to work, but you also want to make sure that this relationship is definitely what it says it is, right? You want to make sure that this relationship isn't just a forced thing. You want this to be as natural as possible, but you also want this person to be a partner, not just a lover, but someone you can work with. And it makes 100% sense, especially when they have different ideas. You want to be on the same page. And I feel like you guys already are. It's just that there's certain things, there's certain ways of doing it that's different, right? And I feel like that's what the Two of Wands in the future is showing us, considering those options. Not completely shutting them down because you're not really sure about how those methods are going to work, but really just considering considering them, right? If not totally doing it. So your external energy is the Ten of Swords. So I kind of feel like this with this energy here, there's a lot of stuff that's coming in that, well, there's something that ends, and maybe not in the most favorable way, but it's definitely an ending. It's something that definitely can't get any worse than this. You overcome a difficult time and overcome a difficult energy. No doubt about it. Is this energy difficult? But it's usually the worst of the worst and the last of the last. Okay. So let's see why the Ten of Swords is coming up in the outcome. What is the Ten of Swords showing us in the outcome? Why is this Ten of Swords coming up in the outcome? The defensiveness, the Seven of Wands. So whatever you're protecting is done. Like whatever you're protecting, whatever you're defensive about, that comes to an end. Whatever the other person's defensive about comes to an end in the outcome. And it's because I feel like whatever they were resistant towards before has been eliminated. Therefore, there can be room for consideration of someone else's ideas and perhaps considering a new approach to something. It's pretty doggone big, family. It's pretty big. Because if this is about moving house, if this is about, finalizing or the relationship, there is other things, other people's opinions do come into play, right? Because you're dealing with another person. But it doesn't mean you guys don't want the same thing. It doesn't mean that you guys don't have the desire to do some things together. It's just that how you guys go about doing it may be a little difficult. Oh, okay. You got some difficult ones from the Power of Surrenders. Okay. So you guys have surrender your fear of change. Okay. Oh, wow. It's like having a hard time now focusing. But anyway, surrender your fear of change. So it says, the universe is reminding you that you are cared for always. Whether you're afraid of a change in your job, your health, or a relationship, or if you're afraid of aging or death, repeat the affirmation. I have faith that all is well. I have faith that all is well. And then you guys have surrender your ego. Okay, so it's not going to focus at all. But it says, surrender your ego. Cultivate gratitude, be of service to others, and come from your heart. A big ego can work against you, but humility will further your goals. All right, fam, that's a big message, and usually a pretty hard pill to swallow. And I don't think it's that you guys are being egotistical or chauvinistic. I really feel like you guys are trying to protect yourselves. It's the reason why you guys are afraid of the change is because it's out of necessarily your control. You got two cards of passivity, and you guys are fixed energy, right? Queen of Swords, Queen of Pentacles. They're both doers, and they both are, they're both, take action in some degree, but they're also very open to changes. They're very open to receiving things. More open than the kings will ever be. And I find that definitely one of the hardest things, like being open to receiving changes that will end up giving you what you want. But you have to be open to receiving and be open to those changes. And it's hard to do. And you've been through a lot. All right. Actions speak loudly. Express your love through your action. Okay. And that's crazy. So I don't think that you guys are meant to stay put and just kind of let everything happen. But I do feel like paying attention to other people's actions is the best way to gauge whether or not someone's trying to control your life or trying to build a life with you. Because there's always two different things, right? I don't think you shouldn't stop communicating what you want, but I do believe that if there are things that you want done and the other person may have a different way about doing it, I feel like letting them do it is the best way to